Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my session, Automating and Integrating Cisco ACI with vRA using Ansible. That session is not just, let's say, ACI. You are able to automate whatever infrastructure you want. The approach applies to everything. If you want to do any kind of Twitter, you have the hashtag at the bottom. That is my Twitter account. So that is the disclaimer that you have been seeing during all the conference. What we are going to do, that we have right here is the Cisco ACI platform. That could be NSX, could be NUAG, could be even storage, whatever you want, because the approach applies to everything. But in this use case, we are using the integration with vSphere, using the VMM, and then we are going to expose the API and take advantage of that API that we have on the different SDN solution. On top of that, we have our vRealize automation that is going to consume the vSphere platform using as an endpoint. And then we have vRealize orchestrator. So for ACI, we have different mechanisms like other solutions. We can use the API plugin that Cisco provides to do the automation. We can use the HTTP REST plugin that you have out of the box in vRA. Or in our case, we are going to put an Ansible server on the middle of both layers, and we are going to use the SSH plugin to run the Ansible commands. So why Ansible? Well, we have those three approaches. The API is really good from the point of view if the workflow that you have out of the box, they are enough for what you are trying to achieve. But then you have different cons. So you know that the interoperability with those SDDs is getting complex. So if you want to upgrade your vRA, maybe you don't have still available the plugin from Cisco. And then you need also JavaScript skill. You need vRA dependency. The same applies for the HTTP REST plugin. But you have more flexibility because at the end you can do any kind of HTTP REST request that you want. Then, again, the same cons. In that case, you don't have inventory in vRA, since with the plugin, you can see the objects of Cisco on your items catalog, on your items. With the HTTP REST and with the Ansible, you need to use dynamic inventory on vRA in order to create your database of items. Why Ansible? Well, Ansible, you have a good interoperability, it's flexible, and it's simple. So the reason that we approach the customer in computer center saying that, hey, you should use Ansible is because we want to encourage and embrace the different teams to produce their own automation. So the cloud team at the end is a bottleneck if they try to develop all the automation. And what we are trying is, hey, you need to learn Ansible. It's quite easy, and you will see the result in a short time. We could create a fourth column that is Python. I will say that this is the evolution from Ansible go to Python. But if you go to the network engineers, the storage engineers, straight with Python, they are going to say, hey, hold a second. I don't want to learn Python because it's really complex for me. I will say that the transition is first Ansible, and later on, they can create their own automation with Python, creating new core module or extra module in Ansible. So I'm going to the demo. That is going to be a lot of demo. It's not going to be a slide. The first part that we are going to do is Postman and Ansible. That you are going to see is everything already in GitHub, in my repo. Okay, it's github.com/pipo2h. You will see now the URL, and at the end of the presentation, you can download the playbook, you can download the vRA package, is everything available for you. So we see here the GitHub repo that you have on the top. Then we are going to scrolling down. You will see that you have all the information about this demo. You have the same information for Postman. So we are going to do first Postman just to do the API calls. After that, we will get the API call in Postman, and we will translate those API calls in Ansible that you can see. Then we have an example of an artifact or manifest. From there, we move to vRealize orchestrator package, and later on, vRealize automation. So then, after that, we are going to open our Postman. You can download the Postman collection. So you have, again, here more documentation about how to consume Postman collection. It's quite straightforward. So you just need, you will see, we have at the moment just two examples. That is the authentication call and the get all the tenant call. So you just click on run Postman. In that case, it's Windows. And you will see that we have the authentication API call and the list all the tenants that we have in ACI. So the authentication call is quite straightforward. We need to create an environment variable in Postman to map those variables that you can see, like host, in that case, that is going to be the API IP. Then the body, we are passing in variables as well, username and password, that they are Postman variable that we will translate later in Ansible variables. You can see the environment variable in Postman. Now we have the host. This is the IP of our API controller. Can be 1, can be 3. Username, password and the token and URL token, they are dynamically populated. So when we do the call, we will get back that information that is what you are saying right now. That you can see there, we are going to save that information from the response that we get from JSON in a token and in a URL token. So we need two, and the reason of two you could do only with the token, but the reason of two is because it's more secure. That one is not available on the cookies. So then the headers, you don't need any header. We just put there because it's to look nice. But with ACI, you don't need to provide if it's XML or JSON. We have run the API call, and like you can see on the bottom, we will have now the chance to gather that information from token, like you can see there, highlight, and the URL token. That information I will show now has been populated there, and now we are in the position to run future API calls. So now we can list the tenant, like you will see on the next API call. You see the URL is different. Now we are calling to the every tenant class. Headers, again, content type to look nice. We are not pushing anybody here. And now the API, we are taking those dynamic variables and pushing in our API call. That is going to list the tenant. That is that we have get 3 tenants. They are the tenant out of the box, infra, common, and default tenant, management tenant. So with that, you are able to run new API calls. So now we are moving to Ansible. How we take those API calls and we map in Ansible. It's going to be straightforward. The first thing that you need to do is clone the GitHub repo. You will see again the URL of the GitHub repo. Once we have the GitHub repo, we are going to move to the VMware 2017 folder. We will have 2 folders, Ansible folder, vRA folder. We will start with the Ansible folder. And in the Ansible folder, you will have the Ansible configuration file. Ansible configuration file is only saying, hey, this is the host file, that is the location, and this is the role path, that is the location. It's really simple Ansible configuration file. Then we have the host file. In the host file, we have our API controllers IPs. In that case, it's a single API. If you have more API, you add your 3 APIs, and then with Ansible, you can choose one of them randomly. So that is the API group with the IP of the API controller. And now we are going to list what we have in the roles path, in the roles folder. So we have 2 roles. We have the role for authentication that is already there, and we have a role to create VRFs in ACI. The reason of those 2 roles is just to make the demo shorter. But in order to create a VRF, we need previously create a tenant. So what we are going to do here is create a tenant role right now. So you have the chance. First of all, before we move to the creation of the tenant, we are going to see how it looks like one of the API calls for authentication. You can see that we are taking the inventory hostname is a variable that is the host file that we had the API group with IP. We are using the URI core module to do API calls. And you can see the body. The body is exactly the same that we had before in Postman. But in that case, we are using the environment variables of your Linux machines to pass the API username and the API password. The reason to use this approach is because later on in vRA, we need to push the credential of each of the users. We are taking, registering in a login variable the output. And again, we are creating a token variable with that output and a URL token that we are going to use later on the future roles. How looks like the VRF role? Well, it's going to be really, really similar. You will see that again is the URA module, and we are leveraging the 2 variables that we have created, the token and the URL token. You can see, again, we have the ACI creating tenant. If URI, the URL has changed, and now you see that we have the dependency of a tenant name and the VRF name. So when you create a VRF, it's mandatory to have a tenant. Then we have the headers, that is cookie and API challenge. You can see between bracket, curly bracket, the variables, and the body. And the body, you see that is item.vrf. What means item.vrf? Because we are going to run a loop. That means that if you want to have your manifest or your artifact with 100 VRF, it's going to go through all the VRF and will create the 100 VRF for you. So the idea is to have everything in a single text file. So let's see how we create the tenant create role that we are missing in order to run our entire playbook. You have two options. You can copy that template that is available in the example folder, or what we are going to do is create with Ansible Galaxy our role. So we are going Ansible Galaxy, init, name of the role, that is going to be VMware.ACI_tenant create. We are going to say that it's offline because we don't want to upload it to Galaxy, and the path of roles. After that, our role is created, and now we need to populate the task file, the main YAML, with the new API call. For that, and accelerate the demo, we are going to copy the VRF task file, and we are going to replace the URL and the variables. You will see right now that we are going to copy from the vRA folder task main.yaml to the new folder on the role that we have just created, the tenant create. Now we need to edit, like we said, the URL. We need to change the variables. Let's see how we are going to gather that information. We could go straight to the Cisco ACI documentation, but if you are a user of ACI, you will see that it's quite cool option that you have there that is called API Inspector. So we will move now there in a short, but we are just changing the name. We are going to clean up the body because we cannot use it for the next one. We are going to replace the register that is going to be called tenant. And in the same time, with items, we are going to say that instead to be ACI VRF, it's going to be ACI_tenant. Now we need to populate the information for body and URL from where we are going to gather that information. Now we are moving to the ACI platform. And in the ACI platform, on the top right corner, you can click and you will see that you have something called Show API Inspector. That is just showing you all that is happening through the GUI in ACI. It's just logging everything that you are seeing right now. When we do a click, you will see that that information is populated with all the API calls, and we are using like a sniffer. We are going to gather from there the URL and the body, and we will post it in our role. So let's just to create an ACI tenant through the GUI. Let's clean up again our API inspector. We are going just to give a name that we can then replace with our variable that we need to make an agnostic our role, submit, and we are going to get the first part because it's the post. So we just copy that information, and now we are going to move to Notepad, and we are going to take what we really need. So we just open Notepad. The first thing that we need, the URL. You can see that the URL has changed. It's not the same than the VRF. We just copy that information. We move to our Ansible task, and let's replace what we have gathered from that call. Now the next thing after the URL, we need the body. So the body, in that demo, we are going to clean up the body, and we will get only with the name. In other use cases, you will need some more information, like the state, if you want to create, to destroy, depend how you approach. But for that demo, and to start, is really good. So we are going to remove everything except the name. So really simple. The distinguished name, we remove it, and also the children's. That body, now we will copy, and we will paste it on the section of body in our Ansible task. And our role will be almost ready to consume. Why almost? Because we have hard-coded the value of dummy. We want to do this dummy, this task agnostic, and we can pass any name that we want. So now we are going to replace dummy with a new variable that is going to call item.tenant_name. The reason again of item is because we want to have the chance to create maybe 10 tenants in one shot. That's the reason to use loops. There you have the replace, and the task file is done. You can see highlighting the tenant name has been replaced. So our role is done, and you could do the same for any kind of ACI task that you want to do. You go to the API inspector, you do through the GUI, copy, paste, new one. It's always the same and same process. How we call those roles? Now we need to edit our playbook, and we are going to say, okay, the playbook is called VMware 2017 demo. The host where I'm going to run is the APIs that we have in our host file. And then the connection local means that all the API calls are done by the Ansible server. We are not executing remotely in the APIs the call. The Ansible server is the requester of all the API calls. You can run it on an Ansible server, you can run it on your laptop. In that case, your laptops will be the source of the API calls. Then the roles, we are going to add the new role that we just created, and our playbook file is done. Now, with that playbook file, we are able to authenticate, create a tenant, and create a VRF. Maybe it's not usable yet because you need more things, but we will see at the end of the presentation a real case scenario. Now we need our infrastructure as code. That is our variable file that we provide to the user as a request. Hey, you just need to complete that variable file. Can be an Excel spreadsheet that you then translate on JSON, but you can see two groups. The ACI tenant group with 2 tenants. We are going to create 2 tenants in ACI called VMware 2017 US and Europe. And then we have 2 VRF, one for each of the tenants. You can see that it's really simple. You can read it, you know what is going on there. You can do, again, the same with the Excel spreadsheet and then use some translation with Python. Quite straightforward. So this is that we are going to push to ACI. We will create 2 tenants and 2 VRF. So before we do that, let's just close and put the windows in the right places. So now, if we run the playbook, it's going to fail. If you remember, I said that I'm getting the credential from the environment variables. So we have not provided any credential yet. So before I run that command, I'm going just to copy the command and save it in the clipboard. We are going to say, hey, export APIC username admin, export APIC password, the password. For that, I just have a file that is hidden in the system, and you just using source will apply those environment variables. So we have the file. Now we will do an echo to see if the values are properly populated. That is going to be the APIC username. We have the admin and the APIC password. We have the password. So now we are good to go. So let's run our playbook. You will see that in the right-hand side, we'll populate with 2 tenants. And we'll refresh, and 1 VRF. You can see that they are at the bottom. Quite straightforward. We have created the 2 tenants with VRF, each of them. And our VRF is there. So if you don't have vRA, at least for network engineers, you have done a huge step, because you can have Ansible and just run your Ansible playbook or automate your network. Or if you don't have vRA, you have OpenStack or whatever, you can still use the same approach. Now we are going to use vRealize Orchestrator and Ansible. Let's say that you are not a customer of vRealize Automation, but you have vSphere, and with vSphere you have vRealize Orchestrator. Okay, let's see how we do that. Now we are moving again to the GitHub repo. In the GitHub repo, you have the VRO folder where you can download the package. The package is straightforward. It's just a wrapper of the SSH run command that you have out of the box in VRO. But we are just gathering the information of APIC username, APIC password, and the variables. You can see our SSH host. That is our automation server. This is not the APIC. This is the automation server, the Linux machine. We have the SSH username, we have the path of Ansible, and we have the playbook that we want to execute. They are attributes of the VRO workflow. If we move to the schema, you will see that this is the run SSH command. It's simple. We don't have anything strange there. And the gather info, you can see that we are going to do is different input, like the APIC username, password, and variables, that is the extra bars that we were using, need to be passed to the run SSH command. You can see that we are having just creating the command that we are going to send to through SSH. We have the APIC export, that is the username and password. We have the path, where is Ansible execution. And then we have the Ansible command, that is the Ansible playbook, name of the playbook, and extra bars. So simple, nothing strange, and you can reuse it as many times as you want. So let's update our infrastructure as code manifest, and let's add a new tenant and a new VRF. So we can keep that we have, because ACI is idempotent. That means that You can run many times as you want, that you will have always the result that you have in your file. We are going to create future VMware 2018 Europe and as well a VRF. So once we have our manifest file, let's go back to VRO and let's execute our workflow. Again, one side one, run, admin. Here we are passing the username and password that was before, if you remember, with the source, that file that we had populated with our credentials, and the path is exactly the same. Nothing changed. Submit. It's calling. There we are. We have a new tenant with a new VRF. Up to here, if you have vSphere, you can do all of that. Even if you don't have vRA, at least you can take advantage of that. So how we do now with vRealize automation using anything as a service blueprint. Let's see. It's going to be quite straightforward. We are moving to our vRealize automation platform. We go to the design tab. Let's create anything as a service blueprint. That is going to show us our VRO server. We are going to choose our VRO workflow there. Then we can rename it. And it's up to you if you want to populate it later, but you can consume on your canvas to create your blueprint or not. That depends on you. The blueprint form, we don't change it because it's okay what we had on VRO. Next, and finish. Now we have a new blueprint that we need to publish to our users. So we are going to the service catalog. We are going to the service to our network automation. In network automation, we are going to add this new blueprint, and we are good to go. So we just go to our catalog, and in the catalog, we are going to the network automation section. In the network automation section, we are going to run our new blueprint, a description. After that, we will provide the credentials. Password, the variable file. The variable file, you can use object storage. We have some customers using object storage, other with GitHub. You can have an NFS share where all the engineers put there, and that is going to be populated. So we are just pasting the path. You could use files like I'm using here. For files, you need to use the add. If you don't want to use files and just the JSON blob, you paste the JSON blob between code, and that's it. So you have both approaches. That is done. Let's see what is happening after we have destroyed the 2018. Let's see if we create it again. That is going to take a little bit longer because we need to go through the stack. There we are. So we have created right now through vRA all that automation. So quite straightforward. It's true that we don't have anything in the inventory yet. For that, you need to use dynamic inventory if you want to populate those objects on the item tab. But if you see the request, you have all the information and the tracking of what the user has sent there. Then you can leverage the benefit of vRA and say, I want approval policies that is going through network engineers in case that you expose to the end users that automation. This is a real case example. We are going to create now a VMware tenant. We are going to create two VRF, public and private, with two bridge domain, DMZ and internal. One application profile with 3 security groups, 3 EPGs, that they are going to leverage micro-segmentation, and we are going to have those port groups available in vSphere to connect our virtual machines. Let's go to do that. In our GitHub repo, we have a folder that is called Extra. There you have a bunch of Ansible roles for ACI that you can consume. First of all, the playbook file. You can see that the playbook file is populated with more roles that now, after create the VRF, we have bridge domain create, application profile create, EPG create, and the mapping between the VMM and the EPG. This is how it looks like our artifact or manifest. Again, straightforward. You just can read it, and you know what is going to happen on that automation. We have the web, EPG, that is mapped with the DMZ network. We have the DV and application that is on our internal network, and then the mapping with vSphere. So now we need to tweak a bit our VRO because the path is different. We are in the extra folder. So we just need to go to the Ansible playbook and say, hey, this playbook is in the extras folder. That's it. We just double check. Let's copy the new manifest name that we are going to use in the vRA call. So we are done. We are going to save this VRO, go back to vRA, and in vRA it's going to be the same process, but we are going to change the extra vars file to the new one. That is going to be a large deployment. Credentials again. I'm using the admin, but you can use the credential of the different users that you have in API with the privilege to the different tenant. I mean, that is granular. That is the same credential that you use for ACI. And the file. We are good to go. ACI in one side, vSphere in the other side. You can see that is 2018 created there. In the right-hand side, we'll populate with 3 port groups, and we are done. We have created our entire network infrastructure for a new service with the port groups that they are able to consume now for the virtual machines in vRA. You just need to trigger the data collection in vRA. Those will be populated, and in the reservation, you will be able to check them to be consumed by virtual machine. Quite straightforward. And if you have any question, I can take the question here. You have my Twitter, my blog, and the GitHub repo where you can download everything that you have seen today. Thank you so much.